This is a continuation of what we currently have. I'm going to change our request here from a promise based to a sync await. So what I'm going,
Sorry,
yeah,
we can't see the screen.
you can't see the screen.
Yes. No.
Oh, my bad. Is it visible now?
Yes, now it is.
Okay, my bad. Sorry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this method to an asynchronous method, and instead of having this lengthy request down here, I'm going to do a const, and let's call this my JSON equals to await, and let's take all of this out, and let's do let's console.log my JSON. Right, so I'm going to refresh. Okay, I'm going to refresh the page, and yeah, okay, so now we have the constructor. Fine. Let's make this .json. Be sure, refresh, character. And then I'm going to refresh that. Right, so we have a constructor response name. Okay. And then character info. Yes, we have a response body. Yes, and now constant response. Await my JSON. .json. And let's log out response. Yes, so this is a response that we have. And now let's change this const name and gender equals to response. And so let's log out name, gender, refresh. Yes, so let's make this not the name, that's the name, refresh. Yes, now the name is inside, and let's make this that gender equals to gender. Yes. Okay, let's see if there's another information that's actually important that we can use. Let's console.log response. Let's see if there are other interesting information inside the response that we can actually render. So we have culture, gender, name, and URL. Okay, let's add culture. Maybe most of them will have a culture. So let's add culture, and let's do a data binding here. and let's add culture here, culture, get culture from the response, and this dot culture should be equal to culture. Okay, so now I'm going to basically explain what I've done. Previously, we used the promise-based fetch request where we made the fetch, got the data, and then what we did was to append the data into the DOM. Now what we are doing is still the same thing but with a cleaner syntax. So instead of having fetch dot then, what we are doing is we are using what we call the asynchronous request, which is async await. And I will put the documentation for async await available. No, I want the MDN docs. Yes, async await. Yep. So I would put this on Slack, and you can take some time and look through the async await function. The async await function, how it works, and what exactly it does. I think I've explained this previously, but just for reference purposes, I'm putting that there. Now we get the response back, and then we take out the name, gender, and culture in the response. And now instead of having this input, I'm going to switch this. I'm going to take this out because I'm not going to be doing a binding here anymore. I'm just going to output this, and let's put name here, for example. Let's save that. Let's refresh that. Let's get character. We'll get code. Nice. And let's take the input out. Let's put gender here. And let's copy this again. Let's come down here and let's put culture. Let's save, let's refresh, let's get this, and then we have the name, elder code, gender, male, and culture iron bond. Okay, so now what we have done is basically we have gone ahead to replace our old vanilla JavaScript game of ice and fire requests and API with basically using Vue.js. Now I'm going to comment everything that we have here, the previous versions, away, but you see how lengthy it is. Now I'm going to comment it out, and we can have a small short syntax, and then I can go through what we have just done line by line and explain every part of it for clarity. So first things first, we mentioned that Vue is it's a JavaScript framework. It's a progressive framework that allows you create user interfaces. The important things I want to note here is that Vue is designed from the ground up to be incrementally adoptable, and that's exactly what we have just done here. We have simply replaced our native JavaScript vanilla calls and DOM manipulation with Vue.js. That's all we have done here. Now, if we come down here, I'm not going to go into the comparison. I'm just going to show a few of the things we have done and how it's done here. Now, it says at the core of Vue is a system that enables us to declaratively render data to the DOM using straightforward template syntax. Now, as you can see, this is basically templating syntax. this is a standard Vue.js instance, and the reactivity is basically the message which is updated dynamically here. Now I'm not going to go, you can go through and read this part of Vue as much as you want and go into it a bit more detail. And as we progress learning how to use Vue.js, we will go into it in more details. But what I'm going to be explaining today is the basic skeleton of a Vue.js app, how it works and what exactly it does. But take note, the core concept of Vue.js is reactivity, manipulating the DOM using the virtual DOM and seeing it real time. Now, I'm going to go back here and let's take this line by line. I will take the components that we created and click at the bottom. We're not going to learn about components today. We would learn about Vue.js components in our next class. For now, it's not super important. Now let's look at what we have done today. So first things first, we basically added a scripts tag to make Vue.js globally available, meaning if I come to the console and type Vue, I should get the Vue function. It should be globally available for me. And now the next thing we did was to declare a new Vue instance. So if, for example, you create a class, right, and you want to instantiate the new instance of the class, you use the new keyword. So Vue is basically a function. And classes in JavaScript are basically functions also. Now what we have done here is we have instantiated a new instance of Vue. Now if I come here and take this out, click save, you see it says Vue is a constructor and should be called with the new keyword. Constructor meaning Vue.js instantiates this function. It's basically an object that's instantiated, so it requires a new keyword. Now let's go back, save this and refresh, and then we have that. Now by default, this is basically a new instance of Vue.js. Now we begin by saying EL. EL here is referring to a HTML element that Vue.js should be mounted on. Now if you come to the documentation, you see that we have EL here and it says app. And you have a div and it says ID app. Remember, when you use CSS and JS also, we target IDs with the hash sign and then we target classes with the dot sign. So this is targeting the ID app. IDs are unique, which basically means they are supposed to appear only once. The names are supposed to be unique to that particular page. So what we do here is that we target the element, the HTML element that has the corresponding ID. In our case, the ID that we are targeting is called GOT View, Game of Thrones View. So I can change this. If I change this, for example, to Game of Thrones View, I save it, and then I do not update this here, and we refresh this page, you see that we get an error. It cannot find the element Game of Thrones View. Now our entire reactivity is gone. There are no values here because Vue.js Vue has not been mounted on this div. And the reason it's not mounted on this div is because we have a different div ID here, and what we are targeting here is different. However, if I take this Game of Thrones view, I copy it, and I come down to our Vue instance and say that the element that I want to target is Vue. It's the Game of Thrones view, all this will change. Now, if you look at this HTML that we have, everything we have here is just normal HTML, right? If I click here, nothing happens, nothing is triggered. Everything we have at this point is normal HTML. When we bind this div, this entire HTML block to Vue.js, this basically becomes the element that Vue actually works on, the element that the Vue reactivity system works on, the rendering works on. So without Vue, this is just name and curly braces and name, like you see here. Name, curly braces, and name, gender, curly braces, gender, culture, curly braces, culture. However, the moment we come here and we do this, we set that div and say we want this div to automatically become the elements that Vue.js works on. If we come here and we do refresh, we see that instantly we have reactivity. What we have defined as the model for character number is automatically, this input box is automatically binded, data binding to character number. Name is automatically binded to name. Gender is automatically binded to gender. Culture is automatically binded to culture. So if we come here and write name Josh, gender Lucky, and culture Steven, and we save this, when we refresh this page, we expect that name, gender, and culture would be equals to Josh, Lucky, and Steven. So if we refresh this page, we have Josh, Lucky, and Steven. Now, what we have here is data binding. We bind this text here. This is just plain text, by the way. What we have here is just plain text. We bind this plain text here to whatever value we have here. However, in the input box, we are binding the input value here, whatever the user enters, is what we are binding to the character number. So this data basically enables you to do data binding with your HTML. That's the functionality. Excuse me. That's the major functionality of the data. Now, the methods are basically your Vue.js functions that you can use to trigger on click. So here we have a v on click, and we say increase Game of Thrones GOT value. And instead of having increased GOT value, now we can change this function name, and let's call it get Game of Thrones character. Now if I come here and I say get Game of Thrones character, we change this method here to get Game of Thrones character, we click save and we refresh. When we click get, we get the right character. Now if I take out this 2 that we have here, I click a save and refresh, we have Lucky. On click we have Eldred Male and Ironborn. Now there is a short syntax that you can use instead of having to write v on click. This of course over time becomes a lot of v-ons that you would get tired of. So there's a shorthand in Vue called the @ symbol. It's like you use your @ in emails. Instead of having v on, you can have @, and these are basically for trigger events. So at click, this basically represents your v on. You can use either one. I'm just showing this for the purpose of knowledge. If you use at click, this would still work. When we refresh this page and we click this, we get Eldred. If we change this to 9 and we click this, we get Eleanor. Let's change this to 307 or 5. We click this and we get Denise. Let's change it to 347. We click this and then we get Edmin Tuli, male and riverman. Now you can either choose to use a click or v-on, but for the purpose of our introductory lessons, I will be using the v-on click handler for now. Now what we have here is a standard JavaScript method function, and this here refers to pretty much your data and your methods. So if, for example, I come here, let's just introduce something new called mounted, and mounted basically means when the page is mounted. Let's say mounted. This would be a function. And on mounted, I want to call this method, this function that we have here. So instead of having, let's say we don't have anything here. Let's say by default we keep this as empty. By default, let's keep this as empty. Let's press save. Let's refresh. Now it's all empty. However, let's say that when the page is mounted, I want to make that initial request to get the value for name, gender, and culture for 358. I can come here and write this dot Game of Thrones character. Now, this basically, this is used to assess methods, all functions that are within methods, and all keys that are within data. So if I do this dot Game of Thrones character, what this is expected to do is that on page mount, like when we refresh this page and this page is displayed, instead of having blanks here, it will make a request to get the character for 358 and then populate this. This is how a lot of websites actually do real-time data loading from external APIs. So if we refresh this page, you see that although we have name, gender, and culture empty, by default, when we refresh the page, something is always pre-filled. Now, the reason why this is pre-filled is basically because we have now called this function. We now have said on mounted, which means when the page is mounted, you should run this.Game of Thrones, this.get Game of Thrones character, which is basically this function that we have when we click. So if, for example, we do 359 and then we click get character info, we will get this. But when we refresh the page, by default, we would always get some values here. Now, our function Game of Thrones character just takes the character number that we have here, and mind you, what we are doing here is object destructuring. What we're doing here is object destructuring. So we basically take the character number, and then we check if it's empty. We return input box cannot be empty. So if I come here, let's refresh this page. I come here and I take this out and I click get character. It tells you input box cannot be empty. And if input box is empty, we send an alert that you need to enter something. But if there's a value, we make a request to the API of Ice and Fire, and then we get a response back, and we do object destructuring of the response again. Note object destructuring, and then we assign. Now what we do here is that we assign the values name, gender, and culture to name, gender, and culture. Like I said, data and methods can be accessed using the this keyword. So this.name is going to reference name, this.gender is going to reference gender, and this.culture is going to reference culture. Now let's say I add, let's make this const app, and let's say it's equal to new Vue.js. And now what we want to try to do is do the DOM manipulation inside our console. So let's come here, let's refresh, and we have defined it as app. So we have app, and basically it tells us it's an object. Now if I say app.name equal to Steven, you see that it actually changes. If I say app dot character number, sorry, equals to 342, sorry, 342, you see that character number is now changed to 342. Now I can actually trigger the get character info even without clicking this. So if I come here and say app.get Game of Thrones character, now what I want to do is trigger this change using the value here. I want to trigger the function get Game of Thrones character, and it's going to take 342 and look for the 342 character. Programmatically here, I basically can do this, and you see automatically this is changed. Now if I come up and change this to, instead of 342, let's change this to 352, and then let's call the function again. It changes Edwin frame. Let's change this to 362. Let's call it again. It changes to Elinor Tyrell. Let's change this to 357. Call this again. Change to Eldon Estamont. Let's change this to 451. And now let's trigger get Game of Thrones, and you see it's now changing. So basically, what this allows you to do is add reactivity to your page with as little as possible code. And here we are assigning whatever values we get from our response. We assign the name to our name here, and whenever this name changes in the DOM, this would also be updated. So whenever the name value changes inside our Vue instance, on the DOM, what the user sees, the name value is also going to be changed. Whenever the gender changes, it's going to be changed. Whenever the culture changes, it's going to be changed. So this is basically the reactivity system of Vue.js. This is the basic introduction of how Vue.js works. And before I go further for setting a homework, please, if you have any questions, just let me know. If there are any questions, Josh and Lucky, please do let me know.
No, none from me. I still just need to go through the previous video to understand it and read through the documentation.
All right.
But yeah, no question for me yet for now.
Okay, thank you. Lucky, how about you?
Myself, I really don't have any questions. It's actually looking very, very nice. I think more easier than vanilla. Yeah, so I think it's easy for me to go through the older code and switch to this one. And I think it's understandable for me as well. So I'm good.
Okay, awesome. In that case, I will stop the video now, and sorry, I would stop the recording. Yeah, where's the recording itself?
Okay.
I don't even. Yeah. Okay. So I stopped the recording. Let's call this intro the view part 2.